I just returned from Tanzania, where, with my wife and 18-year-old son, we trekked up Mount Kilimanjaro along the popular Lemosho route. And it was an amazing experience, but it ended very differently than I expected. My wife and son were able to summit successfully, whereas I fell short of that goal, battling altitude sickness, and was ultimately evacuated off the mountain via helicopter. So in this video, I'm going to share with you our everyday experiences on the mountain, what we loved. I'm going to tell you what was different than expected, and share with you my honestly somewhat frightening experience with altitude sickness that led to my not so glorious evacuation by helicopter. So if you're curious about Kilimanjaro, maybe you're planning your own trip, sit back and watch. This is our story. Our Kilimanjaro trip unfortunately started with a mishap as the airline lost one of our bags. We arrived very late at night and went to our hotel, but had to get up the next morning to go shop for some items that were missing in our luggage. Now, Tanzania is a low-income country, and Moshi, which is the city we stayed at the base of Kilimanjaro, is not really a touristy town. There's not a lot to see there, but we did find a few shops. We were able to buy some things. We also went through a local market, which was neat to see. And we also checked in with our tour operator and rented some equipment, which most tour operators will do. It was definitely helpful, especially in our case, to have that extra day to pick up some things. The next morning, it was time to begin our trek. We met our crew for the first time, loaded up in this van, and started the 3-hour journey to the trailhead. On our way to the trailhead right now. We're excited, a little nervous, but mostly excited.
One team, one dream, habari team, never lose, habari team.
All right. Okay, we've reached Lemosho Gate. You can see down here. This is the place where we're starting our journey, starting our trek. And once you arrive at the gate, there's some waiting. You have lunch, and you usually have to wait a couple of hours to have all your bags weighed and all the paperwork done. But soon enough, it was time to begin our trek. We got a few pictures just as we head out from the Lemosho Gate. I've got to say, I really love the first day. You hike for about 4 hours, and there's some up and down, but you do ultimately ascend up about 1,800 feet. That's about 500 to 600 meters. Now, in our case, it was misty, a little bit rainy at times, and it's more likely to rain on this day because you're at a lower elevation, but the scenery is just spectacular. The jungle, the rainforest that you see is really amazing, very impressive. We saw plenty of monkeys too. There's a couple different species of monkeys, and we saw the furry kind with the big white coat. They almost look like a big skunk, but beautiful. We saw them up close. And then you end up here at the Big Tree Camp. There are a lot of campers here, a lot of different groups, and of course each group, there's about 4 porters to every one tourist hiker. So anyway, a lot of fun thus far, and more beautiful than I thought. This rainforest is spectacular. As dusk came, it was time for dinner, and we enjoyed a warm soup and then a chicken, rice, and avocado dish prepared by our chef. It was terrific. And afterwards, we enjoyed some warm hot chocolate, and then it was time for bed. Day 2 started quite early, around 5 a.m. We got up, had a breakfast, packed up, and soon enough, we were once again heading through the rainforest. After trekking for a couple of hours, slowly going uphill, it became obvious that the forest was becoming less dense. Then all of a sudden, and it happens kind of fast, you pop right out of the rainforest, and the sun is shining. You have to put on your hat. You are now in the Moorlands section of the hike, and you'll be here for at least a couple of days. This is a unique vegetation zone. There's a lot of heathers, some smaller shrubs, some grasslands. Best of all, you get some incredible views. One thing about the Moorlands is the weather is unpredictable and can change very quickly. One minute it's sunny, it's warm, you're in a t-shirt. The next minute it could start raining or the mist could roll in and you need to put on a heavy jacket. Keep in mind, by the time you reach the Moorlands, you're already over 10,000 feet in elevation. That's well over 3,000 meters. You go up altogether about 2,000 feet today. At least this elevation is 2,000 feet more than the previous camp. But that's deceptive because you really go up probably closer to 3,500 feet if you count the valleys that you go up and down, and there's a couple really steep parts. There is one steep section on day 2 called Elephant's Back. It's kind of your first real test. You're already around 3,400 meters. That's over 11,000 feet. And you start to huff and puff a little bit. And it's really one of the first places where you realize and appreciate the porters who are packing up all of your stuff. You're carrying a day pack. Meanwhile, they are carrying all the tents, all the food, even the toilet. All of the main equipment they are hauling up along with their own personal artifacts. It's amazing how well trained, how expert level these guys are. They're friendly, and it's just astounding to watch them navigate even some very steep sections of the climb, both on day 2 and throughout the hike. By the way, you've got no chance keeping up with these guys. They will zip right by you. Most of them have done this dozens, even hundreds of times. They're all in incredible shape, fully acclimatized. So just move over, let them pass you. They will have camp set up and ready when you arrive. I really can't say enough good things about our group. Here we are together, that second evening with Kilimajaro in the background, posing for some pictures. All together, assisting the 3 of us are 13 others that are members of our hired tour group, Habari Adventure. And of that 13, we've got 2 guides. These are the ones that we deal closely with. They do our health checks, and they communicate with us about the plan for the day. But we also have a cook, there's a server, there's one guy who specifically handles the toilet, and everyone else helps us get up the mountain. Those are the porters. Now, they let me peek inside their tent one evening as they were making dinner, and this kind of gives you a glimpse of what they do during the evening. You have the cook there, you have our server helping out, and then the others are resting, well-deserved, as they're the ones, again, who are hauling everything up the mountain. These guys keep to themselves a lot of the time, but they're incredibly friendly, and they're never too far away to assist you with anything you need as part of your journey up to the summit of Kilimajaro. Late that evening, after the winds died down, I stepped outside and took a picture of Kilimajaro rising above the Shira plateau, impressed with the clear skies, and then a spectacular sunrise the next morning. Now, the next day is perhaps the easiest day of the entire journey. You're only hiking for 3 or 4 hours. You go up in elevation about 1,200 feet. So you check into your camp, and you're right there camping around 12,700 feet in elevation. You have some free time this day, which is fun, and I love the views of the valley. You're able to rest. And later that night, we went on an acclimatization hike where we hiked to an elevation of 4,000 meters before heading back to camp for the night. I do want to talk for just a minute about the exceptional food that we had on our trip. Every day, 3 square meals, and they were exceptional. Mushroom pizza, tons of vegetables, various different kinds of soups, crepes, chicken. We were absolutely amazed by the selection and the quality of the food prepared for us each and every day. I even brought a couple of extra bags of granola bars and snacks. Guess what? I hardly touched them because the food was so delicious. Chances are you're going to eat pretty well on your Kilimajaro trek. The bathroom situation at each camp we go to is about as good as you can possibly imagine for an outside trek. We have a portable bathroom. It's set up, it's tarped up, and inside is a portable toilet. It smells decent. You go in there, it's comfortable. I mean, it is about as good as you can ask for, and it's cleaned every day. In fact, one of the members of our crew handles that specifically, so he makes sure it's always clean and stocked with toilet paper. Is it as good as your home bathroom? No, but Still, it's impressive for how convenient and comfortable a camping toilet is here on Kilimanjaro. Later that evening, I took some pictures at the Shira 2 camp where you can see some settlements far below you in the distance. And this is the one place along the trek where you may have some cell coverage. Some people will be making calls. We use the opportunity to send a text back to our family. Aside from this one place, you may not have any connectivity, yet you get used to it, and it's kind of nice not being tethered to your phone. Just leaving Shira 2 camp, heading up to Lava Tower. They call this the semi-final day. It's supposed to be kind of a test because the altitude really starts to affect you. And already I can tell that the air is a little thinner. Got just a little bit of a headache. But we move on slowly, pole pole. As I show some of the footage of our trek up to Lava Tower, I do want to talk a little bit about drugs and medication, which are just a reality for the vast majority of people who are trekking to the summit of Kilimanjaro. And most people are taking a drug called Diamox. This is a prescription medication that helps you acclimatize. The chances of your journey coming to a premature end because of severe altitude sickness are greatly reduced if you're taking Diamox. This is especially true if you're on a shorter 5 or 6 day trek, but even on our 8-day trek, our guides were heavily encouraging us to take it. Even if you are taking Diamox, there are no guarantees that you won't experience at least some form of altitude sickness. In fact, most people have at least some symptoms. In my case, this is really where I started to struggle as we hiked beyond 14,000, beyond 15,000 feet up to Lava Tower. That energy I had earlier in the day, it disappeared. That slight headache that I had, it became much worse. It almost felt like there was some sort of bubble in my chest, and I just could not fill my lungs with air. Along the way, my pace slowed down significantly. So a little bit of bad news for me is we got to the top of Lava Tower, which is kind of the big accomplishment for the first part of the trip, over 15,000 feet. Unfortunately, my oxygen levels were reading pretty low. I made it to the top. I was really fatigued. And Laura and David, made it ahead of me by about a half an hour. They checked my oxygen levels, and I was in the high 60s, which is considerably lower than where you want to be. Laura and David were in the 80s. So I don't know exactly what that means, but it doesn't bode well. We're going to see. We're going to descend now and have a good night's rest. And who knows, get some energy, and we'll see how tomorrow goes. Once you're at Lava Tower, you don't stay there too long. You have a little bit to eat, and then it's time to go back down. You head down a different canyon. And the idea is that you want to acclimatize, and so you climb high and then you sleep low. In this case, you're descending about 2,000 feet down, but along the way, you have some of the most beautiful scenery anywhere on the trek. You pass through a groundsel forest. Now, what is a groundsel? A groundsel is a flowering plant, but in this case, they grow over 30 feet high. Now, these plants can only be found on Kilimanjaro. It's the only place in the world they exist. But you'll definitely want to pause, take a look around, and pull out your camera. Soon we arrived at our camping spot, which was fogged in that evening, but the next morning, we got some beautiful footage. The Barranco Camp is arguably the most beautiful camp spot on the entire mountain. You have the summit of Kili behind you. You have the famous 800-foot tall Barranco Wall leaning on you. You also have a few groundsels around. It's also one of the most crowded camps. 2 different trails converge here, and so you literally have hundreds of different campers around you. Next up on the adventure, we get to scale the Barranco Wall, which is that 800-foot cliff right behind us, which from this angle looks very imposing. In reality, there is a defined trail to the top, and there's a few parts where you do have to use your hands and scramble a bit. There's one little section called Kissing Rock that you do have to scramble around. I think it's a lot of fun. Kissing Rock. Once you reach the top of the Barranco Wall, it's time for a well-deserved break. Most people spend about a half hour here, taking in the views and capturing some pictures. We've been fortunate to have some amazing weather so far. That's the summit of Kilimajaro. Of course, it's about 5,000 feet up that face, and that'll be something day after tomorrow, but clouds are rolling in. Clouds typically roll in this time of year sometime around noon, and so in a matter of a few minutes it'll all be masked in fog. Nevertheless, incredible views all the way around. As the three of us stood there on top of Barranco Wall and captured some pictures looking back at the summit of Kili, I personally felt great. I didn't realize it then, but this would be the last time during the trek where I still felt good and wasn't battling sickness. Soon after we started trekking again, I started to get nauseous and had many of the same symptoms that I had had 24 hours earlier hiking up near Lava Tower. The last half mile before you get to Barranco Camp, there's a deep ravine you go down into and then you have to hike out of it. And I was having extreme difficulty breathing. I ended up arriving to camp about an hour and a half after Lara and David. They were great to come out and greet me, and we posed for this picture, but I was not doing well. That night I had no appetite. I couldn't even get one bite of dinner down, which is a common symptom of altitude sickness. As your elevation increases, your appetite will decrease. I still held out some hope that I would go to sleep that night, wake up refreshed, and be able to continue on, much like I had the day earlier with the Barranco Wall. Unfortunately, the exact opposite happened. I developed a cough and woke up wheezing. Meanwhile, your guides are fully aware of what's going on. Even from the beginning of the trek, they're measuring your blood oxygen level, your heart rate, and also asking you a series of questions. They're monitoring your appetite. They know the prescriptions you're taking. So when I woke up that morning and my blood oxygen level measured in the low 60s, and our lead guide could hear me cough and wheeze, he pretty much insisted that my trek end and I start heading down to a lower elevation. Well, good morning. Looks like this could be the end of my Kili trek. My oxygen levels are low. Got a little bit of fluid in my lungs. My guide is advising me to stop trekking up. In less than 24 hours, Laura and David will be on the top of the summit there. But unfortunately, I won't be with them. It's been beautiful and it's a sad moment not to continue on, but I think it's the safety comes first. I need to get to a lower elevation. So we separate here.
All righty, we're on day 6. David, how you feeling on day 6? How you doing? Stand by Dad, David. Smile. There's Kili. Brad's not doing so well with elevation. He's wheezing and coughing, so he's headed down to get more oxygen. How you feeling, hon?
Pretty tired. Sad to be separated from you guys.
It's real fun. We'll miss Dad.
We took a couple last pictures and then gave some goodbye hugs, and it was time for me to head down the mountain. I set off following our assistant guide down the trail. We had about 8 miles ahead of us. Unfortunately, my situation was about to get more serious. About an hour after this video was taken, while hiking down the trail with my assistant guide, all the symptoms that I had had the last 2 days became much more severe. The biggest problem was I just couldn't breathe. I could also tell that I wasn't really thinking straight, and I had this extreme fatigue come over me. I needed to stop after about every 20 or 30 steps. At one point I sat down and I did fall asleep, at least for a moment or two. Now my guide fortunately realized that I was showing some signs of hypoxia. I just was not getting enough oxygen, so he called for help. My memory's a little bit hazy, but I know that a few minutes later one of the porters showed up with some emergency oxygen. Once I had that oxygen mask on, my situation slowly started to improve, but it still took 4 hours for me to hike just 2 miles, mostly downhill, to a place where I could be safely evacuated. At this point, my guide arranged for a helicopter pickup for me, and I was grateful for it. I really didn't have any other options. With many miles still to go, and even with the oxygen mask on, my health and strength was not good enough to continue on, and if I did, my guide was concerned that staying another night on the mountain at a high elevation, I would risk being hospitalized. Once the helicopter had dropped us off down in the city at a low elevation, my guide and a couple of others still recommended that I go to the hospital to get checked out, but I didn't know exactly what that entailed. So I had them watch me, and eventually they dropped me off at my hotel. I jumped into bed and literally slept for the next 36 hours. I've seriously never slept so long in my entire life. But being at the lower elevation did help me. I did recover on my own without any other medical assistance. It's also worthwhile being aware that if you get sick or injured high up on Kili, you need to find a way off the mountain. Whether or not you summit, a lot of times evacuations happen as you're trying to descend, and there's not a lot of quick ways off of Kilimajaro. Medical evacuations similar to mine, where somebody's descending and they need some help, are very common on Kilimajaro, happen multiple times each day. So my Kilimajaro trek ended in disappointment with a helicopter ride off the mountain. But what about Lara and David? As I said at the beginning of this video, they did make it to the summit. Now, that's not really my story to tell. So I'm going to let Lara jump in and tell of her experiences as she and David ascended to the summit.
Shortly after separating from Brad, Dave and I continued on the trail to base camp. The hike wasn't really too long. You head up a gradual slope for a few hours, but that was an interesting day. Because we were hiking, we heard about Brad's situation. We were obviously concerned about him as we arrived to base camp. Fortunately, our guides informed us a few hours later that Brad had been evacuated in a helicopter, but he was safe and recovering in a hotel. We were grateful to hear the good news. After a big dinner, they encouraged you to go to bed and get a few hours of sleep before you trek to the summit beginning at midnight. In our case, we got up, had a quick bite to eat, then started trekking. Summit night is really hard. As you trek uphill for 6 hours or more, they encourage you not to look up and say you trek at night so you don't see how steep the hike will be. It is very tiring and you don't really stop a whole lot, as if you stop, you get very cold. It's a mental game, and I kept repeating to myself, just keep moving. Dave and I were fortunate enough that we didn't have any symptoms of altitude sickness, and we maintained a good pace. Eventually we reached Stella Point, where I turned to my porter and told him I couldn't go on. He gave me the good news that we were getting close and only had about 30 to 45 more minutes. We were one of the earliest groups to get to the summit, among the very first, as daylight was just appearing. Being on the summit is an amazing moment, and that's really all it is a moment because you aren't there long. Only 15 to 20 minutes to take some pictures next to the sign, but I will say the views are beautiful. There are some glaciers at the top, and the views in every direction are amazing. So cherish your time as you are on top of Africa. Soon enough, we were heading back down, and going down is really hard, especially as you get below Stella Point. You follow this dusty, gravelly trail, and you won't believe it, but going down can be harder than going up, especially on your knees. I had two guys that grabbed my arms to stabilize me so I wouldn't fall as we walked down for 3 more hours. They really helped me out. Our guides and porters were great during our entire trip, but on summit night, they were excellent. They helped with our day packs going up the mountain, and they really helped me going down by supporting me.
We made it, Brad. If you were here, they would carry you too.
Going down is hard. You are tired, you are wearing a lot of clothes, and it was cold going up, but the sun is out and you heat up quickly. I wish I had stopped and taken off a few layers. You don't stay long at base camp. You continue downhill for another several miles, and it took us 7 hours. Man, my knees hurt. I think everybody's exhausted by this point. You've been up and hiking since midnight. Even the guides who have done this so many times were tired. We finally arrived at Barranco Camp. It's the last camping spot and in the forest area. But by that time we got there, we were exhausted. The next morning, it's almost 4 to 5 hours of heading down the trail through the forest, and honestly, I was sick of hiking. I just wanted a shower and a bed. Seeing the gate was a huge relief. In our case, they drove us down to meet Brad, and we were anxious to see him and give him a hug. We met Brad at the tour guide's office. While there, they gave us lunch, and we took our final pictures with our group. They gave David and I our certificate for summiting the peak, and we also had a short tipping ceremony, thanking our porters for all their hard work. Our porters and guides really made the trip an unforgettable experience. After showering and some rest, I was surprised how quickly the bad memories and aches faded. Looking back now, summiting Kilimanjaro is an amazing accomplishment in my life. To be honest, I can't even believe it now. I look back on my trip with accomplishment and fondness. The time spent with Brad and David will be cherished. It truly was an adventure of a lifetime. Who knows? I might even do it again one day.
Now that you've seen and heard our story, what do you think? Leave a comment below, and if you happen to be planning a trip to Kilimanjaro, you will want to check out my other video where I get into the nitty-gritty. I talk about the planning, the packing, even the money. How much did that helicopter ride put me back anyway? So if this is you, if you're planning a trip to Kilimanjaro, check out the link in the description. And as always, thank you for watching.